to today's webinar about IEEE 1547-2018, the new National Interconnection Standard for distributed energy resources like solar PV systems and PV plus storage. This webinar is intended for installers of Enphase solar and battery systems in the United States. My name's Tony Vernetti, and I'm an Enphase sales and product trainer with the learning and development team here. I've been in the solar industry for about 14 years, and I've been with Enphase for about 3 years now. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today. If you have a question about anything we're talking about today, please enter your question in the questions tool of the GoToWebinar tool panel. At the end of the training, we're going to have a Q&A. I'll do my best to answer all the questions that come in. But if I'm not able to answer them, it's great to have those questions logged in the system so I can respond to you by email once I can get an answer to your question. I also want to bring your attention to the fact that the presentation in PDF format is available as a handout. So again, if you look in the GoToWebinar control panel, there's a handout section. You can click the triangle to open that up and download a PDF today. So these are the learning objectives for today's session. After this session, you should be able to name the 2 main areas of focus of IEEE 1547-2018, which I'm just going to refer to as the new standard going forward since it's quite a mouthful. You should be able to explain when and where the new standard will be adopted, how adoption of the new standard will impact existing and future solar or solar and battery systems. You should be able to describe which 3-phase Enphase solutions will be compliant with this new standard and identify compliant Enphase products by their SKU and packaging. So first, let's talk about what this standard is. IEEE stands for the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. IEEE 1547 is the national interconnection standard when connecting distributed energy resources, as I mentioned, like solar panels, etc. IEEE 1547-2018 is the second revision, and it contains underlying requirements for interconnection. It relies on other companion standards for testing and certification, namely UL 1741 SB. These necessary improvements to how distributed energy resources communicate with the utilities are critical and enable our products to adapt more efficiently and cost effectively to the ever-evolving conditions of the grid. So we want to make sure that you're prepared for IEEE 1547-2018. So a couple of bullet points here. First, you should know that while this standard was published in 2018, it's only been adopted by a few states beginning January 1st of this year, but more states are expected to adopt the new standard later this year and beyond. So in those states where it has been adopted, installers must use only compliant hardware from Enphase and other companies for that matter. And we're going to go into detail about which specific products are compliant. To recommend that installers use the most recent up-to-date data sheets from the Enphase website because they do indicate compliance with IEEE 1547-2018. So you want to have those in your building plans when you submit them. So where has this new standard been adopted and where is it going to be adopted next? On this color-coded map, you can see that it's been adopted in New England, New York, Pennsylvania, and Hawaii. And soon, on April 1st, it's going to be adopted in California and New Mexico. It's our understanding that the interconnection application date must be before the adoption date for compliance. Sorry, let me repeat that. Is the interconnection application date is submitted before the adoption date, then you can install today's hardware, the non-compliant hardware. But if you put the interconnection application in after the adoption date, just use compliant hardware. We recommend confirming this with your local utility before installing a system, as it's still early days and we're not sure exactly how the utilities are going to be enforcing compliance with this new standard. So we do recommend talking to your specific utility about it. In general, to be safe, we recommend pulling permits and submitting interconnection applications as soon as possible to give you maximum flexibility with which Enphase products you can use, whether they're the non-compliant or compliant versions. Which Enphase products and systems are impacted? So for new installations, all products are going to be impacted by these new standards on the date of adoption in every state. For existing systems, however, these requirements are not retroactive, so sites that are already installed do not need to be revised or modified in any way to be compliant with the new standard. A couple important notes at the bottom here. So 3-phase implementations of Enphase using the IQ7 series microinverter and the NPR network protection relay, these are not IEEE 1547-2018 compliant, and there isn't a plan to make them compliant. Also, Envoy S metered, which is a version of the Envoy designed for older microinverters from the M family or M series family. This particular combination of the M series plus the Envoy S metered is not compliant with 1547-2018. That may impact retrofitting those sites with storage, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So let's go back to 3-phase solutions. So as I mentioned, 3-phase systems using standard IQ7 series inverters are not compliant with the new standard. However, the upcoming IQ8 commercial microinverters, which are due out later this year, will be a compliant system. The IQ8 commercial series will include 2 models, the IQ8P3P and the IQ8H3P. These microinverters are purpose-built for 3-phase 208-volt solar projects and other voltages with a transformer. And they're going to be able to accommodate the highest power solar modules on the market today. For additional information on these upcoming microinverters for 3-phase commercial systems, please reach out to your Enphase sales rep or visit the web address shown here, enphase.com/installers/commercial. To help answer questions about 3-phase Enphase systems and compliance with the new standard, I have this simple table that kind of spells it out for you. So as noted, 3-phase systems with the upcoming IQ8P3P and IQ8H3P will be compliant when released later in 2023. You'll also see the IQ8D mentioned here. So the IQ8D was a product that was in development and actually went into beta, but it was discontinued. It's not going into production. So the IQ8D is not a compliant system. And then lastly, 3-phase systems with IQ7 series microinverters will not be compliant with the new standard. So if you have any IQ7 based 3-phase systems in your pipeline, you should check with your utility about when they're going to enforce the new standards and consider switching the plans to use the upcoming IQ8 commercial if appropriate. So let's review which SKUs of Enphase products are compliant. All IQ7 and IQ8 series SKUs are compliant with the new standard, as are all IQ batteries and IQ system controllers. For IQ combiners and IQ gateways, however, there are newly redesigned versions that are compliant. It's important to note that the product names are not, so the product name of the compliant model and non-compliant is the same. So you really have to look closely at the SKU number to know that you have the compliant model. Please note that only the IQ Combiner 4 and 4C will have new compliant versions. The IQ Combiner 3 will not be compliant. The IQ Combiner 4 can be installed with either IQ8s or IQ7s. Please also note that the IQ Gateway will have a new compliant version. The Gateway S metered, as I mentioned before, which is an older model of the gateway designed to be compatible with M series and S series microinverters, it's not going to have a new model that's compliant. For those of you who aren't familiar with the IQ Combiner 4, it's a combiner box for the PV system branch circuits, and it also houses the IQ Gateway. That printed circuit board on the back wall of the box you can see here is the same board that's inside the standalone IQ Gateway on the right. PV systems that exceed the capacity of an IQ combiner may use the standalone IQ Gateway and an off-the-shelf electrical panel for the combiner box. Let's take a closer look at the SKU number so you can easily identify the right number for a compliant product. The new compliant IQ Combiner 4 SKU begins with X2. The non-compliant SKU begins with X. If you don't see a 2 after the X, then it's not the compliant model. And the same is true for sorry, let me jump back here. The same is true for the IQ Combiner 4C. The 4C is simply the Combiner 4 that has a built-in and included cell modem. The new compliant IQ Gateway SKU begins with ENV2, whereas the non-compliant SKU begins with ENV and doesn't have a 2 after the ENV. To help you easily identify the new compliant products, there are going to be labels on the cardboard box of the excuse me, on the cardboard box of the IQ Combiner 4s and the IQ Gateways. Now, if you're buying gateways in larger quantities, if you're getting a box of 12 IQ Gateways, that larger box is also going to have a label on it stating that it's compliant with the new standard. Now, if you happen to have an IQ Combiner, but you don't have the original packaging or box, and you want to make sure it's compliant, just flip it over and look at the sticker on the back. Or I'm sorry, for the Combiner, look at the label on the inside of the door. Right here in the middle on the left-hand side, on that sticker will be the SKU number. So again, you want to look for that SKU that starts with X2. And similarly for the IQ Gateway, if you've got one of these without the box, just flip it over, and on the back there's going to be a sticker, and it'll have the SKU number there that will say ENV or ENV2. And if it is the ENV2 SKU number, it's also going to say IEEE 1547 2018 compliant. So let's talk a little bit more about what the standard is. So what's new with IEEE 1547 2018 that requires some new hardware and firmware? The key difference has to do with interoperability requirements. Interoperability is defined as the capability of 2 or more networks, systems, devices, applications, or components to externally exchange and readily use information securely and effectively. Now, there are 2 key areas of the interoperability requirements: hardware and communication protocol. Here we have the hardware requirements. First, a local distributed energy resource, or in this case, a PV system, must have a communications interface located at the site. With the Enphase system, the IQ Gateway is this local DER communications interface. And on top of that, the DER interface must remain available whenever the DER is operating. Now, the issue with our previous SKU numbers is that they would actually restart during what's called a low voltage ride-through event from the utility. So if there was a low voltage for a period of time from the utility, perhaps because of a brownout, the old SKU would restart and it would be temporarily unavailable during that time, which means it was not compliant. So the IQ Gateway was redesigned with larger capacitors so that it would have the ability to stay on during and after a low voltage. In summary, the new compliant IQ Gateway will stay on during one of these low voltage ride-through events. The previous model would restart and the communication interface would be off, so it wouldn't be compliant. A compliant system must support one of 3 possible communication protocols. Now, the actual protocol used at a given site is going to be specified by the utility. The 3 potential protocols are listed here. First, there's IEEE 2030.5. This is supported by Enphase already. This one has been selected as the interoperability protocol in California and Hawaii, and it appears to be emerging as the de facto national standard interoperability protocol. The second one is called Sunspec Modbus. Support for this by Enphase is currently under development. This is a legacy protocol commonly used in older equipment and some energy management systems. The last is DNP3. Now, support for DNP3 is not planned. DNP3 is a legacy protocol commonly used by utilities in large power plants and substation automation. Because it's used only in large power plants, it might be required in very large multi-megawatt systems, but we don't anticipate it being the de facto standard. We're currently unaware of any utility that requires DNP3. When you're commissioning a system with the installer app, or ITK as it's known, make sure that you select a grid profile that has 1547-2018 in it. When you add the IQ Gateway in the devices and array section of the app. As the adoption of IEEE 1547-2018 is just starting, we don't know exactly how the electric utilities are going to implement this. You may be asked to provide some sort of proof or documentation that the system is compliant. So one thing you can do is run a report from the installer portal, also known as Enlighten Manager. The name of this report would be the Grid Profile Settings Report. The grid profile is indicated on this report right here at the top right. And as mentioned at the beginning, we also recommend using the latest Enphase product data sheets in your plan sets because it indicates clearly on those data sheets that the products are compliant with this new standard. If you provide these details to the utility and they want additional information to demonstrate compliance, please reach out to your Enphase account manager and we'll help get you that documentation that you need. We have heard from some installers that utilities have asked for the UL Certificate of Compliance, or COC for short. If you need to get a copy of the UL COC to show in an AHJ or utility, follow the instructions on this page. You can create a free account with the UL Solutions Product IQ website and then search for the file number noted on this page and then print a PDF. There's a lot of text on this page, so take a screenshot if you can, or download the PDF that's in the handout section so you can have these instructions handy. In California, installers are also preparing for the sunset, or I should say sunsetting of NEM 2 and the beginning of NEM 3, which is going to happen on April 14th. As you California installers probably know, installers can lock in NEM 2 for their customers by basically submitting interconnection applications before April 14th. And these applications must be free of major deficiencies. So if you're submitting an interconnection application sometime between April 1st, the IEEE start date, and April 13th, the last day to submit to preserve NEM 2 status, we just encourage you to be sure that you're selecting the compliant SKU numbers for Enphase microinverters and combiners and gateways if those are required inputs in your application form, just to avoid potential rejection of that application, which could potentially impact NEM 2 grandfathering. Quick knowledge check quiz here. So where and when will IEEE 1547-2018 first be adopted? So it's already been adopted in New York, New England, and Hawaii, and Pennsylvania, and it's going to be adopted next in California and New Mexico on April 1st, 2023. True or false? Existing solar PV systems must be upgraded with compliant hardware when IEEE 1547-2018 is adopted. The answer is false. So this new standard only applies to new systems. Existing systems don't need to be modified to be made compliant. What are the two main areas of interoperability compliance? Hardware requirements and communications protocol requirements. True or false? IQ combiners and IQ gateways can be made compliant with the new standard simply with a firmware upgrade. The answer here is false. The IQ combiner and IQ gateway hardware must be compliant. So that means you have to check the SKU number. Name 2 ways to identify a compliant IQ gateway or IQ combiner. First would be simply to look for the label on the box for that equipment. Now, if there isn't a box, you can find the SKU on the actual product label on the inside of the door of the combiner, or if you've got a standalone gateway on the back. Which Enphase system should I use for 3-phase solar projects to be compliant? So if compliance is required, you must use, for Enphase anyways, you must use the IQ8 inverters coming out later this year, IQ8P 3P or IQ8H 3P. Now, because we've been doing these webinars for a while, we have received many questions from installers. So I've got a few of the common FAQs here, which I'll just read through here. So first, when will I be able to get compliant Enphase products from my distributor in California? So the compliant SKUs are already available at most California distributors in limited quantities. So if you're ordering from your distributor and you know that you want to have compliant products with your order, please be sure to specify that with your distributor. We have also done these educational webinars for distributors, so they're aware of the ins and outs as well. Second, can M-series microinverter sites have storage retrofits and be compliant? So this is hard to give us a clear answer for. Most systems with M-series microinverters have a legacy Envoy S gateway. Envoy S products, as I mentioned earlier, are not compliant with this, and they're not going to become compliant. It's not planned by Enphase. So adding storage to an M-series site that has a legacy Envoy S could potentially trigger a new interconnection agreement, which may require compliance, and therefore would require an upgrade to compliant hardware. We're not sure, again, how this is going to be enforced by the utility, so we encourage you to please check with your local utility. And if you do get information or get clarification on this, I would love to hear from you. If you could email me by responding to the email you got when you signed up for the webinar, or let your Enphase sales rep know so we can educate people correctly on this. Next, what if I install a UL 1741 SB IQ gateway? So that's the UL testing standard for IEEE 1547-2018. So what if I install a compliant gateway or IQ combiner area that adopted IEEE 1547-2018? Well, the answer is it doesn't matter. UL 1741 SB is a subset or a superset that includes compliance with the previous UL 1741 SA. So basically, you can install a compliant IQ gateway or IQ combiner in any area that hasn't yet adopted IEEE 1547-2018. How does retrofitting PV systems with batteries or adding PV capacity impact compliance requirements? So this is sort of similar to one of the previous questions. And similar answer, this is up to the individual utility and how they're going to enforce that. So we recommend please checking with your utility regarding retrofits or add-ons. Can we use IQ7 Plus for single phase 208 volt commercial and or residential sites? So yes, the IQ7 Plus can be installed on single phase 208 volt. It's not very common, but in the Northeast US, it is not uncommon, I guess you could say. So yes, single phase is fine. It's the 3-phase systems with IQ7 series that are not compliant. And that brings us to the last question here. Can we use 3 single-phase systems on a 3-phase system? So again, this is a 3-phase system or 3-phase implementation, and this system configuration would not be compliant with the new standard. So that sums up the content for today's webinar. I'm going to open up the questions tool here and see if we had some questions come in. Question: new system under review with PG&E. May I send a single line drawing to Enphase for compliance verification? Sure, Martin. What I'd recommend is sending that to your Enphase regional sales manager if you're in touch with them, or if you have the contact information for the field applications engineer from Enphase. They're the ones that would review single line diagrams. So if you're not sure who your rep is, let me know by email, or you could put it in here, the questions, and I will make sure that your RSM gets in touch with you. A question about if there's going to be a recording of this webinar. Yes, this has been recorded, and we're going to put it on our Enphase YouTube channel, which you can view at any time. So I noted that you asked about this, Brandy. I will send you a link to this webinar. Okay, question from Jason. What are the correct SKUs to use for IQ8 series microinverter for use when submitting to SCE in California? So the SKU numbers for the IQ8s, I mean, all IQ8 SKUs are compliant. So you don't actually have to worry about the IQ8, it's specifically the IQ combiner or the IQ gateway SKUs, which we mentioned earlier. Basically, the IQ combiner SKU must start with X2, or if you're using a standalone gateway, the SKU must start with ENV2. So question from Brandon, if we have IQ Combiner 4 in stock, which has the old SKU, would it be fine to submit application just by updating SKU by including 2. So I don't think you want to do that because you're basically submitting an application with a SKU number that's not the SKU number of the actual product that you have. What you would need to do is submit the application with the correct SKU, and then you use the actual product that has the correct SKU number. Okay, question from Armando. Can I get a download of this presentation? Armando, if you look in the GoToWebinar tool panel, you'll see a section for handouts. Click the little triangle to open that up, and you can download a PDF of today's presentation. Okay, question from Alexandria. SunPower AC module systems use Enphase microinverters with their PVS6 monitoring equipment. Do I know if this PVS6 hardware is compliant? That's a great question, Alexandria. I have not heard anything about that. I don't know. I will try to find out for you and get back to you by email. But great observation about SunPower AC modules. SunPower is generally on top of things like this, so I would be shocked if they don't have a solution to be compliant. But it's worth double checking, absolutely. All right, I don't see any additional questions come in. If you do have any questions that come up after we've concluded today and you've thought about the information we covered, it's easy to get back to me. Just reply to the confirmation email you got when you signed up for this webinar, and that email will come directly to my inbox and I can get back to you. Thank you very much for joining, everybody. Hopefully this was a useful session for you. Have a great day.